If you're relatively new to constructing a syllabus, or if you've been doing it for a while but you really want to figure out how to optimize for learning and for engagement, then this video is for you. I'm Dr. Fowler. I'm an educational psychologist and a professor. I've been teaching for over 10 years and I'm actually pretty obsessed with course design. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you the top things that I think about and the ways that I structure whenever I am going to create a new syllabus. And make sure that you stick around to the end because I'm going to tell you how you can download a syllabus guide so that you can always have these tips handy with you when you go to create a new syllabus. Let's begin. First, you can and should humanize yourself in your syllabus design. So when you think about it, when students receive your syllabus, often this is the first piece of information that they're getting to get a sense of who you are and what it's going to be like for them to learn in your course. So one of the first things that they're going to take a look at is how they can contact you. So you want to provide your contact information, but this is a little bit more than just where your office is. So of course, you do want to let them know where they can find you, but I also want you to think about how do you want to be contacted and what is your general policy around responding to contact. So do you prefer email? Some professors even give out their phone number on their syllabus. I don't necessarily do that or recommend it, but I know that that is an option if you feel like that aligns with who you are as an educator. And then also we can think about office hours. So having all of this information available and making sure that you yourself have looked at it and thought through, yes, these are ways that I can be contacted. These are times that I have available to be contacted. And then I also think this is a really good place to humanize yourself a little bit more by encouraging students to actually reach out if they need to. So there can be this conception that students have that professors don't actually like it when you email them or when you stop by their office. And we really want to try and debunk that if we can. So I like to include language like this, where I really encourage students to come to my office, to reach out and ask questions. I've had colleagues before let students know that they've got snacks or candy in their office, or they don't necessarily have to have a question in order to come by. All of these pieces of information kind of gently signal to your students, hey, I actually care about you and I want to get to know you, and they can start to get that sense right at the beginning of your syllabus. The next thing that students are typically going to see is the kinds of materials that they need to have access to in order to complete your course, whether that's software or a textbook or some other thing that they're going to need. So one, of course, you want to be really clear here about what they need, but two, this is going to be my plea for you to really consider thinking outside the box a little bit when it comes to the content delivery. So we typically are like, all right, this is the course I'm teaching. I need a textbook that covers this. And while that can be a totally fine way to go, textbooks can often have a couple of issues. So one, they can be really expensive, especially because sometimes you need the latest edition in order for the page numbers to align with the page numbers for something else. And that can be really stressful. And then two, they also are often really boring. Textbooks can be really boring, and we want our students to be excited about our content and to engage in it. Of course, that doesn't mean that every single thing we assign has to be fun in nature, but I do encourage you to think about how can I get students to buy in a little bit more and engage with readings, and then also do that in a way that isn't going to be really burdensome for them financially. And so that's where OERs come in. OER stands for Open Educational Resources. My university library has an entire repository of OERs that we can search for, but really if you even just look around online, there are some amazing resources out there that are completely free, and they're written by experts just like textbooks are. They just are completely open source and free. So students can access them, you can access them without having to pay $50, $100 plus. And then I also really like the addition of things like YouTube videos, podcasts. There are so many experts out there who have created amazing platforms where they share their knowledge, and you can share that with your students. So if you were going to assign a textbook reading on attachment, you could instead assign a podcast that is put on by an attachment researcher. This is a great option. And then also, by not going the textbook route, you're able to add in a lot of diversity in who your students are hearing from. With a textbook, they might hear from a few authors, but with different kinds of article readings and OERs and podcasts and videos, you can really bring in lots of different voices and perspectives that your students can have access to in order to understand the content of your course. So that brings us into the expectations for students. There are a couple of key policies that I think are really important for you to address in your syllabus if they're not already specifically addressed by your university, or sometimes even if they are, it's good to have additional information about what you're expecting in your specific class. So one of the first things that I like to include is my in-class tech policy. And this varies depending on the class that I'm teaching and the level that I'm teaching it at. I teach undergraduate students. My policies there look different than they do for graduate students. But think about what tech looks like in your class. You might be in a class where students actually need to have tech. They need to have either a laptop or a tablet or something that they can access in class. Or you might be teaching a class where you would like tech to be minimized or maybe even not allowed in your class. Another reason why you're going to want to have that on the syllabus is that this can impact accessibility. And if you do have students who need tech for accessibility purposes, having that on the syllabus makes sure that they can have that conversation with you before you get too deep into the class to make sure that we're being very equitable and that everyone has the things that they need. It also just sets the tone. So even for our students who don't need tech for accessibility, it's good for them to know ahead of time that these are going to be the expectations, and you want to be clear about that from the beginning. Late work is the next policy that I think it's really important to outline in your syllabus, and this is another great place for humanization. To acknowledge to your students that you understand that life does happen, and here are the policies with respect to late work. So again, I'm not going to write this policy for you, but I can share with you what I typically do. And what I like to keep in mind is I'm thinking about what is the best way that I can mirror what's happening in the quote real world for students to best prepare them. So in the real world, there are going to be some instances where late work or showing up late to something has higher stakes. If I'm working with other people, there are other people relying on me. That's a place where me being behind or me being late is going to maybe need to have some higher consequences. And likewise, there are times in the real world where we can have some extra grace and give somebody an extension, or family emergencies, sicknesses, things like these come up. We don't want our students to be afraid to ask for help or ask for extensions if we need them. We want to give them the tools to be able to discern when it's appropriate to ask for an extension and when it's not. So that is what I like to do when I'm thinking about my late work policy. And again, I'll share the one that I wrote. Feel free to adapt if you like it. Next policy I like to talk about in the syllabus is extra credit. And the reason why I think this is especially important is because this can be a really difficult bridge to cross with your students if you're not clear about it initially. So sometimes you can run into a situation where students towards the end of the semester are asking for extra credit or what kinds of extra credit that they can do. And that puts you in a place as a professor to have to make that decision under more pressure. And then also that ends up being student by student. And that's where we can run into some equity issues as well. I would recommend is that if you're going to offer extra credit, that extra credit is always offered to the entire class. So everyone has equal opportunity to participate in the extra credit. I recommend that the extra credit be relatively low in terms of points. I wouldn't recommend having the option for students to have done really, really poorly on assignments throughout the semester and then do some extra credit and then somehow still pass the class. Passing the class should reflect that you have a solid understanding of material, not that you finagled yourself through it. So extra credit should be relatively low in points, and it should be activities that actually represent deeper than expected engagement. Finally, AI. AI policies are starting to be included in the syllabi. So if your university has one, of course, include that, but you also might want to think about what you want to do for your specific class. Are you okay with students using assistive AI? Are you okay with sources like Grammarly? Do you want students to cite their AI use? How do you want to handle that? Students need clarity right now. We have many students who are not attempting to plagiarize, but who are genuinely confused about where the line is and what is okay and what is not okay in terms of AI use. So if we come to them from a place of wanting to get on the same page of understanding and not from a place of being accusatory, that can really help us all to have a conversation about, okay, what AI use, if any, is appropriate in this class. And once we have all of those pieces in place, it's time to start thinking about the purpose or the learning goals and outcomes of your course. This is going to be the backbone of your course. Whenever students get a syllabus, you can see they often flip to that assignments page. The assignments that you select should be very tightly aligned with your course goals and outcomes. All of those things should flow together nicely. So write those out. Many syllabi require that you include course objectives, but that can sometimes be something we skim over. I would encourage you to make sure that everything that you're doing in the class, assignments, assessments, content, are all flowing from those course objectives. I can't tell you exactly which assignments to pick, but I can tell you a way that I like to think about it that I think is helpful. So it can be very easy to fall into a habit of just saying, okay, it's a class, so I'm gonna have readings, I'm gonna have quizzes, I'm gonna have tests, I'm gonna have a final paper, and going with that format. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that format, but that is not always the best format just because it's a typical format. So really think to yourselves, these are the skills that I want my students to have. What kinds of assignments and opportunities for practice are going to help them build those skills? And this doesn't have to be so many. A few key things to include throughout your course as assignments that are going to give students the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding of those major skills. I'll share in the guide that I'll link in the description some examples of how I do this in my classes. I do usually like to have things be project-based and then have lots of scaffolding throughout the course. I like when students are able to have creativity in their assignments. This is my personal preference. It doesn't have to be yours, but what does need to happen is that you are clear about why you are including certain assignments, because when assignments are misaligned from the course objectives, that's when students start to feel like the course is disorganized, or they start to perceive assignments as busy work, and we certainly don't want that. Another rule of thumb I like to go by is that the stakes of your assignments should be in proportion to the opportunities that you give students